This is part two. Uh, did you know that President Bush was a con man, the same as President Ronald Reagan? We're just finishing talking about these deficits here. You're supposed to cut the deficit in half here. The 203.5 by 209. Of course, that didn't happen. Now, this is another a false statement or misleading statement by Bush in his State of the Union address, February 2, 2005. Can you see over there? Okay, sorry. Sorry. Listen, Bush said the system, however, on its current path, is headed towards bankruptcy. And so we must join together to strengthen and save Social Security. Fixing Social Security permanently will require an open, candid review of the options. He's not being open and candid. He looted $1.379 trillion from the Social Security Trust Fund to pay for the Afghanistan and Iraq wars during his 8 years in office. And that cost is not included in his budget deficits. That's fraud. Bush also said, year after year, Americans are burdened by an archaic, incoherent federal tax code. I have appointed a bipartisan panel to examine the tax code from top to bottom. And when their recommendations are delivered, you and I will work together to give this nation a tax code that is pro-growth, easy to understand, fair to all. He also failed to do that. He made it more unfair. Giving Congress power over the tax code is like letting the fox guard the chicken coop. Simpson Bowles, commissioned by President Obama, is an example of congressional incompetence. It is a near reinstatement of President Reagan's Tax Reform Act in 1986. This is a picture of President Bush signing the Tax Increase Prevention and Reconciliation Act of 2005, extending the tax cuts on dividends and capital gains for 2 more years and increasing the alternative minimum tax exemption limits, stealing $70 billion more from Uncle Sam during 2 wars. This bill is irresponsible, irrational, and unpatriotic. And these are his backers or accomplices. Men by the thousand are dying and suffering severe injuries in Afghanistan and the Iraq War, and these rich men are having a ball back home, giving themselves huge tax cuts. Let's go to the picture. Okay, this is Bush signing the bill that I was just referring to. Now this is Vice President Dick Cheney here. According to the Henry Waxman website, his estimated tax savings on dividends and capital gains is $116,000 per year. Now remember, he broke the Senate 50-50 tie and voted for the 203 tax cuts. That gave him 6 years of reduced taxations on dividends and capital gains during 2 wars. And this bill here will give him 2 more years, a total of 8. Now he's a staunch supporter of the war in Iraq. He stands behind Bush. This is Dennis Hastert. He is the Speaker of the House. He helped Bush push this bill through the House. He also voted for the Iraq War. Now this Isabel Frisk, Senate Majority Leader, voted for the 203 Bush tax cuts. He helped Bush push this bill through the Senate. He voted for the Iraq War, named one of the most corrupt members of Congress, the 14th richest in the Senate. This is Mitch McConnell. He voted for the 203 Bush tax cuts. He voted for this bill. I'm looking here at this list of cabinet members, Bush's cabinet members, and I see the name here of Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Labor. Her estimated tax savings on dividends and capital gains per year is $21,074 to $82,939. That's per year. Well, that's his wife. He voted for the Iraq War and both the Bush tax cuts. Now this is John Boehner, right here. He voted for the Iraq War. He also voted yes to retain reduced taxation of dividends and capital gains in 2005. That was in December. Okay, and this is again Bill Thomas, Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Now the purpose of that position is to find ways and means of funding the two wars Congress started. But he's using his tax expertise to find ways and means of cutting taxes on the wealthy. And he voted for the Iraq War. Okay, this is Kay Hutchison. She voted yes, authorizing the use of military force in Iraq, voted for the 203 Bush tax cuts, voted for this bill here. Her and her husband are millionaires, and they receive $60,000 a year in tax dividends. Now she went on Meet the Press, and she said these Bush tax cuts are good tax cuts. What these people here all have in common, they either backed the war in Iraq or they voted for it. And they're all Republicans. Now why is Bush smiling here? Is he some type of an idiot? This is an immoral bill that he's signing. It says here on the front, tax relief for all Americans. No, that's false. 88% of filers report no capital gains. 75% report no dividends on returns. Can we go up just a little bit? Okay. Now the reason why this bill was irresponsible and unpatriotic, it was passed during two wars, and the 2-year extension of the reduced taxes on dividends and capital gains was for the years 2009 and 2010. Why is the Congress extending them in 2006, 3 years ahead of time? The answer, Republicans may not control both houses in 2009. Okay, here are some of the quotes from the debate in the House of Representatives by Democrats. Ms. McCollum. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the Republicans' tax reconciliation bill. This legislation is a cynical tax giveaway for the wealthy, paid for by slashing services critical to families and heaping debt on future generations. H.R. 4297 includes $70 billion in tax breaks, primarily an extension of the capital gains and dividend tax cuts. Almost half of that $70 billion will benefit those making over $1 million a year. In Minnesota, 68% of the benefit of this bill will go to only 2% of taxpayers. Those making $200,000 or more will see an average benefit of over $6,000, while those making under $75,000 will see a return only of $55 on average. Now, we're going to go to Mr. Stark here. This $70 billion sham defrauds the working class to line the pockets of the super wealthy friends of the Republican Party. Mr. Cardine, where is fiscal responsibility? Why are we not looking after our children and grandchildren? Why are we adding more debt to what they're already going to have to pay? Mr. McDermott, the party of 1% is going to get a reward. The millionaires are going to get a windfall for which they did nothing except attend fundraisers. Every millionaire will get a windfall of $41,000. The average American makes that during a year. He will get $16. Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Speaker, this blatantly unfair and grossly irresponsible legislation represents the last gasp of the Republican Party's failed economic policies, which have only caused greater disparity in America and driven our nation into the fiscal ditch over the last 5.5 years. Mr. Doggett, Mr. Speaker, some folks really do get all the breaks. And I'm not talking about winning the lottery. The lobbyists are winning. The very wealthiest few in this country continue to hit the jackpot with their Republican friends controlling Washington. Mr. Emanuel, Mr. Speaker, it's deja vu all over again. Another windfall for the wealthy, while everybody else gets to work for a living. By my count, this Congress has now financed 3 wars with 4 tax cuts. How else do you get you get $300 billion in annual deficits, $3 trillion in new debt accumulated in just 4 years, and a budget that raises the debt ceiling to $10 trillion? Mr. Etheridge, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to voice my opposition to H.R. 4297. I have long supported tax reform, but this bill is the opposite of responsible policy. The Republicans in Congress have once again failed to provide the American people with a fair, common sense tax reform bill. Instead, they are trying to promote a bill that hides its deficiencies behind gimmicks and trickery. Mr. Farr, Mr. Speaker, with today's vote on the Tax Relief Act of 2005 conference report, the Congressional Republican leadership is planning once again to give huge tax cuts to Americans, Congressional Republican leadership. They're planning to give huge tax cuts to the wealthiest 1% of Americans, while leaving 99% of Americans with little to no tax relief. A federal government hamstrung by deficits and a future generation saddled with monstrous debt. Okay, Mr. Markey, Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. With this bill, we are engaged in a second phase of the Republican reconciliation game. That's exactly what it is, a giant con game.